First contact. The Galactic Assembly Chamber fell silent as Ambassador Sarah Chen took her position at the central podium. 300 alien representatives from across known space watched the human with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases, thinly veiled contempt. Humanity's petition for recognition was unprecedented. No species had ever requested assembly membership so soon after achieving faster-than-light travel. Representatives of the Galactic Assembly, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the weight of 7 billion human lives resting on her shoulders. Earth thanks you for this opportunity to address the gathered nations of our shared cosmos. From the upper tier, Ambassador Krulvox of the Archon Hegemony leaned forward, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the chamber's light. The human speaks well for a species barely a century into space. His translated voice carried a harmonic undercurrent that failed to disguise his condescension. Sarah continued undeterred. For thousands of years, humanity dreamed of this moment, to know we are not alone, to join a community of intelligent beings among the stars. They are children, hissed Delegate Zorix from the Vespid Dominion, mandibles clicking. Children who still fight wars on their own planet. High Counselor Tilana of the Azurian Republic raised a graceful six-fingered hand for silence. Her luminescent skin pulsed with subtle blue patterns, a sign of patience in her species. Let the human finish. We were all young once. The massive view screen behind Sarah suddenly flared to life, interrupting her prepared speech. Urgent alert symbols flashed across its surface as a harried communications officer, not human, but a blue-skinned Eloran, appeared. Emergency transmission from the Orion Arm border. The officer reported, voice tight with alarm. The Krellian fleet has breached the demilitarized zone. They've attacked the Spherian diplomatic convoy. The chamber erupted. Sarah gripped the podium as shouts in dozens of languages overwhelmed the translation systems. The ancient conflict between the Krellian Imperium and the Spherian Collective, a war that had raged for centuries before humans had even invented radio, had just escalated. High Counselor Tilana's voice cut through the chaos. Ambassador Chen, I regret your petition must be postponed. The Assembly must address this crisis immediately. Sarah nodded, but didn't leave the podium. Instead, she watched as the screen showed real-time footage of massive warships exchanging devastating fire. The elegant curves of Spherian vessels contrasted with the angular predatory shapes of Krellian destroyers. Energy weapons carved brilliant paths through the void, while smaller craft darted between them like schools of fish evading predators. The Krellians claimed the Spherians were transporting forbidden weaponry, reported the Eloran officer. The Spherians deny the accusation. They always deny, rumbled General Drax of the Tauran Protectorate, his massive fists slamming onto his console. 700 years of denials while they build their secret arsenals. And 700 years of Krellian aggression. Countered Ambassador Lith-Ah of the Aquarian Conclave. They provoke conflicts to justify their military expansion. Sarah cleared her throat. The sound was subtle, but somehow carried through the din. If I may ask a question. All eyes turned to her, many surprised that the human was still present. What efforts have been made to verify either claim independently? She asked. Uncomfortable silence followed. Finally, Tilana spoke. The Assembly has attempted mediation 17 times in the past century alone. Neither side accepts neutral inspection teams. Because inspection teams can be compromised, General Drax growled. Or because the truth would reveal Krellian lies, Litha shot back. Sarah absorbed this, considering. On Earth, we have a saying. The first casualty of war is truth. Admiral Vexorn of the Centauri Federation, who had remained silent until now, regarded Sarah with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights like living gemstones. An insightful observation from such a young species. Perhaps not so young in some ways, Sarah responded. Humanity has fought its own wars. We've learned some hard lessons. Before the conversation could continue, the view screen changed again. A new figure appeared. a Krellian commander, his scaled face partially obscured by a respirator mask. Their species had evolved in a high-chlorine environment, making standard assembly atmospheres toxic to them. The Spherian vessel carried prohibited bioweapons, the commander declared, voice distorted. We have recovered evidence and executed justified preemptive defense measures. The screen split to show a Spherian representative, a graceful, crystalline being whose light-based communication created a shimmering aurora around her translucent form. The Krellian claims are fabrications. Our vessel carried humanitarian supplies for the refugee colonies in the Epsilon sector. Sarah watched this exchange with increasing concern. Neither side seemed interested in dialogue, only in reinforcing their position to the assembly. Hours later, in the Earth delegation's temporary quarters, Sarah paced while her team worked frantically to understand the situation they'd stumbled into. So we finally reached the stars, and we find they're just as messed up as we are, remarked Dr. Kai Novak, the delegation's xenosociologist. He adjusted his neural interface, scrolling through databases of information on the conflict. Worse, replied Commander Elena Reyes, military attaché to the delegation. They've been fighting the same war for 7 centuries. Makes our world wars look like playground scuffles. Sarah stopped pacing. What if that's the perspective we need? Kai looked up. What do you mean? We're newcomers, outsiders. We see this conflict differently because we haven't been living with it for centuries. Sarah moved to the holographic display in the center of the room. Show me everything we have on both species, Krellians and Spherians. The display flickered, presenting biological, cultural, and historical data on both aliens. The Krellians, reptilian, hierarchical, evolved in a high-chlorine environment. The Spherians, silicon-based, communal, living primarily through light-based interactions. They couldn't be more different, Kai observed. Biologically incompatible, culturally opposed, which is probably why they've never resolved anything, Elena added. They can't even breathe the same air to negotiate face-to-face. Sarah's eyes widened. That's it. They've never actually talked, not directly. Everything goes through intermediaries. Translations, ambassadors. A chime interrupted them. The door slid open to reveal High Counselor Tilana, her blue luminescence subdued, a sign of concern. Ambassador Chen, she said, entering with graceful steps that seemed almost liquid. I apologize for the interruption of your petition. Sarah waved away the apology. The crisis takes priority. We understand. Tilana studied the human with eyes that swirled with colors. Your question in the chamber was unexpected. Many species new to the galactic community avoid involvement in the ancient conflict. On Earth, we have another saying. Sarah replied, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. A ripple of blue-green passed across Tilana's skin. Amusement, perhaps. Your species has many sayings. We've had a lot of time to think while we were stuck on one planet. Tilana moved to the holographic display, examining the data. You study our oldest problem with fresh eyes. Interesting. Counselor, Sarah began carefully. What if Earth offered to host direct negotiations? Neutral ground, customized environments for both species. Elena stiffened. Ambassador. Tilana's skin flashed purple. Surprise. Your world lacks the necessary security protocols and diplomatic infrastructure for such an endeavor. But we have something no one else has. Sarah countered. No history with either side. No preconceptions. And, she added with a slight smile, considerable experience with seemingly irreconcilable conflicts. Kai stepped forward. Ambassador, this is highly irregular. We're still petitioning for membership. Perhaps, Tilana said, her colors shifting contemplatively. That is why it might work. The human suggestion is unorthodox, but intriguing. The chamber's communication system chimed, and a voice announced, emergency session reconvening. All delegates report immediately. Tilana turned to leave, then paused. "Come, Ambassador Chen. Your perspective may be valuable." Back in the assembly chamber, the situation had deteriorated. The view screen showed multiple conflict zones now, as allies of both the Krellians and Spherians mobilized their forces. "The Vespid Dominion stands with our Krellian allies," announced Delegate Zorix. "We are deploying defensive fleets to the Orion border. Then the Aquilon Conclave will support the Spherian Collective," countered Ambassador Litha. "We cannot allow this aggression to stand." The hidden strategy. 6 weeks after Earth's unexpected diplomatic gambit, Commander Elena Reyes stood in the observation dome of Harmony Station, Earth's newly constructed orbital diplomatic facility. Below her, the blue-green sphere of humanity's homeworld rotated serenely, oblivious to the potential catastrophe brewing above it. "They arrive tomorrow," said Sarah Chen, joining Elena at the viewport. The ambassador looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes betraying countless sleepless nights spent preparing for this unprecedented summit. "Both delegations?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Military intelligence was her responsibility, and she'd been tracking the approaching vessels for days. Sarah nodded. "The Krellian diplomatic cruiser will arrive at 800. The Spherian lightship follows 3 hours later, keeping them separated even in orbit." Smart. Elena studied the station schematics on her datapad. Security protocols are in place. The environmental systems for both species' quarters have been triple-checked. And the negotiation chamber. Elena swiped to a new display. "The dual environment system is ready. Dr. Novik's team has been testing it for a week. The barrier maintains perfect atmospheric separation, while allowing clear visual contact." Sarah sighed, pressing her forehead against the cool, transparent aluminum of the viewport. "Are we in over our heads, Elena? The assembly gave us this chance, but some delegates were practically laughing at us." "Probably," Elena admitted with a wry smile. "But that's the human way, isn't it? Jump in, figure it out as we go. That approach works for exploration. This is different." Sarah turned to face her colleague and friend. "If we fail, we don't just embarrass ourselves. We could trigger the very war we're trying to prevent." Elena was about to respond when her comm unit chimed. "Commander Reyes, please report to Security Hub 3. Urgent." Minutes later, Elena stood before a wall of monitors, watching as Dr. Kai Novik played back security footage from the station's recently delivered Spherian environmental systems. "I caught it during routine surveillance," Kai explained, freezing the image on a maintenance worker adjusting something inside an air circulation panel. This technician inserted something into the system, then filed no report about it. Elena leaned closer. Identification. Jorgen Voss. Contracted through Orbital Systems, Incorporated background check came back clean. "Too clean?" Elena asked. Kai nodded. "I had the same thought. I ran a deeper scan. His identity is real, but there are subtle inconsistencies in his work history." "Where is he now?" "Departed on the supply shuttle this morning." Elena straightened, her military training kicking in. "What did he plant?" "That's where it gets interesting." Kai brought up a microscopic scan. "It's an atmospheric destabilizer. Subtle. It would gradually increase chlorine levels in the Krellian section over several days, making them think we can't even maintain their basic life support," Elena realized. "They'd walk out immediately, claiming human incompetence or deliberate sabotage." "Exactly. But here's the question. Who benefits from sabotaging talks that haven't even started?" Elena's eyes narrowed. "Someone who doesn't want peace." 2 hours later, Elena gathered a small team in a secure conference room. Present were Sarah Chen, Kai Novak, Captain Maya Okafor of Station Security, and Dr. Liam Sullivan, Earth's leading xenobiologist. "The sabotage attempt confirms what I suspected," Elena began without preamble. "There are factions within both the Krellian and Spherian societies that profit from this conflict. They don't want resolution." "That's speculation," Sarah cautioned. "Informed speculation," Elena countered, pulling up data on the main display. I've been analyzing this conflict since we first learned about it. 700 years of war that never quite escalates to total destruction, but never resolves either. It's almost maintained. Kai leaned forward. You think the war is deliberate? I think it's convenient. Look at the economic data. Elena displayed trade figures and resource allocations. Both civilizations maintain massive military-industrial complexes, entire economies built around war production, generations of political leaders who've risen to power by promising victory. Captain Okafor nodded slowly. Peace would be economically and politically destabilizing for both sides. Precisely, Elena confirmed. And beyond that, I believe there's a deeper reason why mediation has failed 17 times. Dr. Sullivan, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. The biological incompatibility. All eyes turned to the xenobiologist. Commander Reyes consulted me last week, Sullivan explained. The Krellians and Spherians aren't just culturally different. They perceive reality differently. Krellians process information sequentially, linearly. Spherians experience multiple simultaneous perspectives, a kind of biological quantum computing. Translation issues, Sarah realized, even with the assembly's best technology. Information is fundamentally lost, Sullivan confirmed. It's not just words being converted, it's entire modes of thinking that don't translate. Elena activated a secure holographic projector in the center of the table. A three-dimensional model appeared, a completely new design for the negotiation chamber. That's why standard mediation has failed, she said, and that's why we need to try something completely different. The others studied the design with growing interest. This isn't the approved plan, Sarah noted with concern. No, it's not, Elena acknowledged, but I believe it's our only chance for success. Kai whistled softly. The assembly won't like this. Neither will the delegations, which is why we don't tell them until it's too late to back out, Elena said firmly. We're going to implement this overnight, before either delegation arrives. That's, Sarah hesitated, risky, possibly even a violation of diplomatic protocol. If we follow protocol, we'll fail just like the previous 17 attempts, Elena countered. Humanity's strength has always been our adaptability, our willingness to try the unconventional. Captain Okafor studied the design. This would require massive security adjustments and significant biological monitoring, Dr. Sullivan added, though his eyes shone with scientific interest. I need all of you on board, Elena told them. This isn't just about making a good impression anymore. This is about preventing a war that could eventually spread to Earth. Sarah took a deep breath, then nodded decisively. Explain your plan in detail, Commander. The night was a blur of activity. While most of the station's personnel thought they were making final routine preparations, Elena's trusted team worked frantically to implement her radical redesign of the negotiation process. By morning, Elena stood in the command center, watching as the Krellian diplomatic cruiser approached. The massive vessel dwarfed Harmony Station, its angular design bristling with weapons systems, despite its supposedly peaceful mission. They're hailing us, reported the communications officer. Open channel, Elena ordered. The view screen activated, revealing a Krellian diplomat. His scaled face was partially obscured by a breathing apparatus, but his vertical slit eyes conveyed cold authority. This is Ambassador Vexkar of the Krellian Imperium, the alien announced. We are prepared to dock. Welcome, Ambassador, Elena replied formally. I am Commander Elena Reyes, Earth Defense Force. We are honored by your presence. The Krellian's eyes narrowed slightly. Our scans detect unusual activity within your station. Explain. Elena maintained her composure. Final preparations for your arrival, Ambassador. We've been working through the night to ensure everything meets your requirements. Vexkar studied her for a moment, then gave a curt nod, proceeding to docking bay. As the communication ended, Sarah joined Elena at the command console. That went better than expected. He's suspicious, Alina observed. They all will be. But once they're aboard, momentum will carry us forward. 3 hours later, the Spherian lightship arrived, a stark contrast to the Krellian cruiser. Where the Krellian vessel was dark and angular, the Spherian craft appeared almost translucent, capturing and refracting starlight in hypnotic patterns. The Spherian delegation was led by emissary Lyria, a crystalline being who communicated through pulses of light that the translation systems converted to sound. Earth's hospitality is appreciated. Lyria's translated voice chimed as she materialized in the reception area. Unlike the Krellians, who had to walk through airlocks and corridors, the Spherians could transport themselves short distances through light beams. Though we sense deception in your preparations, Alina stepped forward. Not deception, emissary. Innovation. Explain, demanded Lyria, her crystalline form shifting colors. You will be briefed simultaneously with the Krellian delegation in 1 hour, Alina replied. I ask for your patience until then. The Spherian emitted a pulse of golden light, skepticism, according to Dr. Sullivan's briefing materials. Very well. We shall observe human protocol. For now. 1 hour later, both delegations gathered in their separate environmental chambers, divided by a transparent barrier as originally planned. What they didn't expect was Alina Reyes standing in a third central chamber between them, wearing what appeared to be a modified environmental suit. What is the meaning of this? Demanded Ambassador Vexcar. This is not the agreed protocol. Emissary Lyria pulsed rapidly. We concur with the Krellian objection. Explain this deviation. Alina activated her suit's enhanced communication system. Distinguished representatives, I am here to introduce Earth's contribution to these negotiations, a new approach we call direct dialogue. She gestured to her suit. This prototype allows me to survive briefly in both your environments. I will physically move between your chambers, carrying messages without technological translation. Confusion emanated from both delegations. Your translation technology is insufficient. Vexcar questioned harshly. On the contrary, Alina replied. We believe it's too efficient. It converts your words but loses the cultural context, the nuances that might be key to understanding. Lyria's form shimmered with multiple colors. This is unprecedented. As is Earth's involvement, Alina countered. For 7 centuries, you've relied on technology to communicate. We propose something different. A human intermediary who physically experiences both environments, who can explain not just what is said, but how it is meant. Vexcar conferred with his delegation, while Lyria pulsed in complex patterns with hers. This is dangerous for you, Vexcar finally noted. The chlorine levels in our chamber would damage human tissue with prolonged exposure. And our light frequencies can overload human neural systems, added Lyria. I'm aware of the risks, Alina acknowledged. But sometimes meaningful dialogue requires sacrifice. A moment of silence followed, perhaps the first time in centuries that representatives of these ancient enemies considered the same idea simultaneously. We will permit this experiment, Vexcar declared eventually, though we question its effectiveness.